Should be good. Hello everybody, welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today I will be playing around with an image from the Tonalism Facebook page. That's the Autumn Challenge photo. It's by Autonu Hanjang. If I mispronounced that, please forgive me. It's a beautiful sunset and we're going to be working on that. This is my second go at it. Last time when I played around with it, I played around with wash after wash, just an overall wash, just changing the tone and the feel of things. I used some lamp black, I used raw sienna, I used some different things, and it was a lot of fun, but I wasn't quite happy with the end results. I even started playing around with some gouache and, highlighting clouds and seeing how that looked. I even did washes of white gouache over those areas. So today I'm going to take a completely different approach, and it's going to be another one of my experimental type days. And the experiment is going to be this. I'm going to take some Chinese ink, which I have right here, the Yasutomo traditional Chinese ink. I believe I bought it at Hobby Lobby. I want to say it's less than $10. And does it have a price tag on it? It doesn't have a price tag on it, so it might have not been from Hobby Lobby, but I've seen it there. I've also seen it on Blick.com, and yeah, you would find it on Amazon, etc. So it's a cheap, I guess you'd call it like a sommelier type ink. When I was doing the Chinese ink paintings, I used that. They even have versions of it that have silver in it and gold in it and have different looks to it. But anyway, I'm going to play around with that for my darks, and I'm going to do my darks first, and I'm going to work at the ink aspect. Chinese ink, from what I understand, is the same thing as India ink. It's something that you don't want to put in fountain pens. You don't want to leave on your brush to dry. You just want to be careful with it. It should be completely waterproof. It should be light fast as well. So the inks, the Dr. Martin in India ink or the Speedball India ink, those should all essentially be the same thing. Okay, so with that said, we have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. I'm filming this live for Twitch, so if I start talking to anybody, it's because somebody came into the live stream and was commenting. And let me just adjust my camera just a little bit. Just like that. There we go. And we should be good to go. Now, with this experiment, my first thought was, do I do an overall wash or and wet the paper and then feed the ink into that? And my answer is, let's experiment. So we're going to go wet and wet with India ink. And then next time we experiment, we can do a kind of a dry brush with the India ink. Okay, so Stonehenge Aqua, taking the large hake. By the way, this is a 140-pound paper cold press. And while I'm doing this, while this is saturating, I'll tell you a quick story. This morning, my fiance is like, "Where's Harrison? Where's Hammy?" Those are our two cats. She's like, "I could hear them crying, but I can't find them." And they were in the art room, And if you watched other videos, you know that I don't really let them in here because of oil paint and all that. And they were in here with the door closed. We have no idea how they got in here. And her speculation is that I slept-walked and let them in. But I don't know how that could possibly be true. So it was a very weird morning, us trying to figure that out. Maybe our house is haunted. I'm going to use a Chinese brush for this one. You could probably use any round brush. I may at some point be like, hey, let me leave for a second to go get some fresh water, because now I'm realizing that I'm going to, like I said, you don't want to leave it to really dry on the brush, but then I don't want my water to be saturated with ink throughout the whole painting. Okay. So anyway, so this is a Chinese brush. This is one of the combination brushes where it has the stiffer hair on the inside and the softer hair on the outside. So it could be used for kind of mop effects, and then it may have more potential chiseled effects. I'm just using it to apply the ink. So while I do this, just let's observe the distribution of the wet and wet. We could see one area where I may have not had it wet, or one thing you always want to watch out for is oils on your hands, lotion on your hands, anything like that can cause areas of resistance within a watercolor paper. It's amazing how far it dispersed up and down. This is just a little antique ink holder that I'm utilizing right here. A little Asian sushi tray would work. Let's get this area more wet. And the sushi tray would give you like this kind of the soy sauce tray, which you've seen me use in other videos, would help you mix a little bit of washes in. Also, I think they call them like kind of the Petal Pallets. Yeah, I'm gonna start using water here. And in fact, I'm gonna use the sushi tray right here so y'all can see. I'm gonna water it down. So the Petal Pallets, usually they call them like the porcelain palettes, and they have a center area where you can put the ink. You can put it in any one, and then you can go radially in a circle around that, putting in your washes of different tones. In fact, we did something like that probably back in 2000, let's say just 7. That was one of the cats. Back in 2007 with pen and ink drawings in a like a drawing 1 class, which was a lot of fun. And I think that was one of the reasons that inspired me to try the Chinese ink. And if you've watched this channel before, you know I'm very fond of fountain pens, which this ink cannot go inside a fountain pen. There are 2 pens out on the market that are specialty that could potentially hold this ink. The Noodler's Boston Safety Pen. I have 2 of those. They're just beautiful pens. And but I do not use them for this ink because I cannot figure out how to dismantle them to do a complete cleaning. It's a very antiquated, probably an updated antiquated system that's used to create that fountain pen. And so we do see quite a drying shift taking place, which, to be honest, I am happy that that's happening, because then I could come over on top and get my tonal variations. Anyway, and then there is one was it the Indiograph or something? I think that's what it's called. I think it was a Kickstarter type thing where it started up, but never really researched it because I looked at the price and it was out of my price range. Essentially, the way they work is that the pen itself acts as an ink vial, and the nib, when not in use, rests inside the ink. Therefore, it's not able to dry off in the feed or anything like that. Just gonna grab a little water, pull this down. Guys, I need y'all to please stop running around. They're about 2-year-old cats, so they're still playful. Do a little bit of wash here and then play around. So this is pretty much wet and wet. Like I said, we're looking at how it disperses. We're looking at the tonal shift. We're observing a tonal shift taking place. And in fact, we have hard edges right here already, which is quite a surprise. And I think y'all saw how saturated the paper was. I think one of the things that made me want to experiment with this was I was using, I think I told you with my last attempt at this scene, I used black to at the end to start darkening things up, and it was a good push. I did enjoy that. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not the best at granulation taking place with watercolor, and that's a very big attribute of ultramarine, especially mixed with the earth tones. I feel that the darks that I get are very granulated, and I just wasn't looking for that effect. Let's see. We could probably allow some hard edges to be there. The water looks beautiful, so this is a water area. Let me bring that in. I don't want that opening on the side for the eyes. Leave that light in there. Okay. Now, we're going to dry this off. We're going to observe the tonal shift with the complete drying. So if you have earbuds on, just take them off. Now I'm going to stop for a moment. You see I have a pool right here. I'm going to try to push it off to the side because I don't want that cauliflower edge to take place. So there was copious amounts of water out on this. So, for the most part, we're dry. And I think that this is worth just looking at and taking time to discuss. We did have the drying shift. So the tones, it lightened up as it happened. However, it does look darker on the Kindle. I'm looking at the screen right here. That first mark that I did, and I commented halfway through the wet and wet phase, and I said, oh, it's lighting up right there. And I came in with another quantity of that ink, and we could see that it darkened up considerably. So, that being said, I think a long-term wet and wet painting phase, maybe about 15 minutes long, as it dries, adding in more paint, building up those areas, adding in more ink, building up those areas, would be a positive effect. Also, after we did the dry off, we could probably do another go with this ink. And standing alone, if you wanted a monochromatic type painting, this may be a very viable option. A bottle of, like I said, $10 ink, and the a cheap brush. This is, I wouldn't say it's cheap. I don't remember the price, maybe 10 to 20 bucks. But if you use probably a squirrel mop, this is what, $20 off of Amazon. The hake, I'm sure the hake can utilize it as well. With one kind of main big brush and then a smaller brush, you can complete the work of art with this. So, so far, I'm pleased. So notes for future experiments: continue through the drawing phase, keep on painting, to experiment with a second layer of India ink on top. Now, one thing that I had not, planned out was the fact that my water was going to get inky. So, let me just take 20 seconds to run in the kitchen, dump this out, and grab some more water. I'll be right back. Hammy, keep them all entertained. Did Hammy do his famous lay on the floor trick? Most likely. Okay, so it does feel a little cool. Let me just hit it again real quick. Let me take a picture with the Kindle because I want to have that potentially as a reference to share this idea with my painting friends, and if anybody had wanted to see that at a later date. But we'll get right back to where we were. Okay, so now onto the watercolor. So for the most part, India ink should be waterproof, and I'm going to experiment now with rewetting the paper, and we'll paint wet and wet in watercolor on top of this. Okay, that should be wet enough. I'm trying to go gently with this as to not really lift much up. I don't think we got any ink off, so that's good. Ooh, I wonder if you could, well, I mean, you could India ink on location, let it dry, come home, and then color in. It's kind of almost like I think it's called a grisaille in oil painting, where you do an underpainting that's monochromatic, and then after it dries, you come back in and work on top of that. Let's grab raw sienna and see how this interacts. That's my main curiosity, is how these colors are going to sit on top. So raw sienna. And I feel like I'm being timid in regards to this application. I'm worried about pulling up that Chinese ink underneath, but I shouldn't really worry about that. And like I said, I'm live streaming this, so I'm going to upload it onto YouTube or Patreon at a later date. But we have Kai in the live chat. How's it going, Kai? Today we're experimenting with India ink wash, and then taking watercolors and washing it over it. It's a scene I painted 2 days ago, and I was trying to get it darker and darker, so the experiment now is to do dark from the beginning and then play it backwards. So you're doing good? That's good. Not gonna lie, I woke up a little headachy this morning. Started up work again this week. I'm a school teacher, and I've been drinking a lot of caffeine, so I think this morning was kind of a caffeine withdrawal type morning. So I woke up, drove to the gas station, and got an energy drink. Okay, so far this is a wash of raw sienna on top of this black. I'm going to grab the paper towel and try to lift out the light in that spot. So we have our light source coming from this region. Kai is stressed out because they're still in school. College, high school, anything like that? Y'all in America with our COVID openings of school? With our school opening, I'm going to grab some ultramarine and throw a little bit in that sky. I'm going to mix a little bit of that raw sienna there with it to kind of mute it some. You don't get a green between those two, you kind of get a more muted gray. Our school opened at, we had 30% of our students are doing completely virtual, so they're staying home, and then they have an online teacher. We then have alternating days where one day one group of students come to school, the next day the other group of students come to school, and we're in phase 2 or 3 in my state, and that's what we're currently doing. This week it went pretty well. It was just weird, 2 days in a row teaching the same thing. So I effectively taught the same thing like 10 plus times. So you get to the point where you could totally almost space out because you've spent so much time and effort previously doing that. Yeah, and I think the distance learning, I think Kai said they're doing distance learning virtual. And a lot of college students are doing that as well. That's quite difficult. It's a different way of learning. Teachers that I've talked to that are doing Zoom teaching are expressing dismay over the fact that they can't see their students' faces and look for questions. Like if a kid is confused, you can usually kind of see the look on a kid's face, and then from there address it. and they are not capable of doing that at the moment, unfortunately. So that was a little bit of ultramarine on top of this. On the video, I'm not liking the granulation with this one. That's where we kind of see that textured effect within the paint itself. I wonder if I would take a phthalo blue and neutralize that. Let's see. I can mellow it out with burnt umber. Maybe grab some Payne's Gray in there. See how that works. Yeah. Then unfortunately with distance learning, classes like labs or electives just aren't really, able to take place. We have welding at the school that I teach at, and if you want to learn welding, you have to do it hands-on. I need to darken this landmass. Oh, so you're learning watercolor? Yeah. Watercolor has a learning curve to it, and there's a lot of different approaches and theories to it. I take a fast and loose approach where I paint wet and wet at first, and then I have a few different methods, like wet and wet, and then I'll use a paper towel to add and subtract as things dry and push things around. Some I'll paint all the way from wet to dry. Other times it'll be wet, then a dry off, and then we'll play around from there. So I have a lot of different approaches to it. But if you're teaching yourself watercolor and you use a lot of YouTube, I highly recommend Rick S. And I put these up on YouTube too, so if you want to check that out, I'm Andrew Broussard Watercolors on YouTube. I think I have a link in the Twitch. But other watercolors, Rick S. is really good tutorials. Joe Menza, David Usher, Alan Owen, Lois Davidson, Posey Gaines. Those are all mainly fast and loose painters. There's the guy, Mind of Watercolor. He has a lot of different stuff on there. Who else? Yeah, illustrations. So illustration, yes, you're more kind of pen and ink, and then you're washing over it. Is that what you guys are doing? Is that kind of like what I'm doing here, where I put the ink down and now I'm essentially backfilling with color? Yeah. There's Lois Davidson has done some really good videos. I don't know if she has the videos of it up, but she's produced some really good works lately where she takes her pen and inks, and I believe at times she'll use, a beat up, like a stick from the yard to apply it. But she'll do that of a cityscape or a castle, and then or a marine area, let it dry, and then watercolor over it and back paint it. So check her out and tell her I sent you. Yesterday was her birthday, actually. What else? Also, recently joined a Facebook page, The Golden Age of Illustration, 1850 to 1950. That's a time period where They had a lot of whimsical fantasy type realism / illustration, utilizing just pen and ink or this technique. You know, there's a lot of beautiful stuff that people are posting from famous painters throughout that time period, or painters you may have never heard of. So that's golden age of illustration. I'm just playing around with this dark, just applying it throughout. I really don't want harsh edges in this painting. I wish that I had hit this area more with the India ink. But overall, I'm more pleased with this interpretation than the one I did the other day. I may play around with a little touch of gouache as a single highlight or two, but the last time I got too overboard with that experiment. With watercolor, you know, there's of course numerous ways to get whites on the paper. You can either utilize a masking fluid, tape, or one thing people use is wax. But to remove the wax, I believe you have to use a paper and iron on top, and it'll melt the wax off and remove the wax. So that's kind of a difficult method. You can use the credit card to scrape back. You can use paper towels to lift those spots up. A razor blade to scrape those areas up. Magic eraser, you can use that. Magic erasers, melanin foam, which is super cheap on Amazon or eBay. I grab a little bit. I use light red oxide. It's a little too much, but kind of bring it to this spot. And I'm thinking maybe using a little gouache there. Okay, yeah, I was on a ramble. I was talking about different ways to apply, get whites in a watercolor painting. And then, of course, you know, one of the ways is the white gouache. And you know, I always talk about how people look down on gouache, but that goes back to the Victorian era when they were teaching the populace. You know, the critics were teaching the populace how to read paintings, or what was good and what was bad. So it comes from a trying to separate watercolor from the other mediums that were out there. I think they felt that it pushed it too much towards, here's some lemon yellow. They pushed it too much towards oil painting, and it was kind of, I guess, losing its individualism. But I am all for using gouache and watercolor. I don't like what dead people from the 1850s tell me what to do. But yeah, gouache. I have a separate tray for gouache. Yeah, it's taken me a long time to figure out how to spell gouache. It actually comes from an Italian word, I believe, that means mud. But yeah, so I have a palette for gouache, and I have different tubes. I use the Da Vinci brand. If you're into it, you can check out my YouTube, and I have some still lives that I did with the gouache, and some figure painting with the gouache, just studies. But I'm not proficient with gouache yet. But that's the brand I use. It had a good price point, but there are other brands out there that are probably better. I mentioned Mind of Watercolor as a YouTube page. He has a video comparing the different whites from the different gouache brands and showing the opacity of them. So that might be something to look at. The Royal Talons brand used to be cheap off of Blick. Whenever they would have, you know, 20% off, and they would actually have those percent off, but I think those went up in price. I stupidly, I was using gouache with portraits, and I was cleaning up the art room, and I threw out, I think, 6 tubes accidentally of gouache. Like over $60-$70 worth of gouache. My whole Zorn palette of it. I was devastated. I looked everywhere. But yeah, so gouache is fun. There's also a Facebook page dedicated to gouache, Gouache Sketchers. It's not as active as other watercolor pages, but there's some amazing painters on there, and they could probably really help point you in direction if you're looking to get into gouache. In fact, let's switch over to that now. I'm going to do a dry off, so if you have earbuds on, watch your ears. It'll take about 30 seconds, 20 seconds to dry off. Actually, since we're talking gouache and I'm going to use it, you can put it on your palette and it can be reconstituted, but it's difficult to get the full effect for me when I reconstitute. So usually I do find myself working straight from the tube. So I have the lumps there that I wet and pull from, but I do often have to put out fresh gouache if I'm going to utilize it. And I just put out a dab because I'm only going to use a dab. You don't want to put the white gouache on your palette for watercolor. The reason being that chalkiness infiltrates everything. Everything starts to get that gouache effect. Also, if you just want to dip your toes in gouache, you could buy just a white and then mix your watercolors into that white, and that will give those a body. It'll make them more opaque. So that alone will give you a little bit of experience with gouache. So I just want a little bit there. Kind of a little accentuation. This is a number 4 rigger, a silver black velvet. You can get those off of Amazon, or yeah, you can get them off of Amazon. And Blick has them too. Probably, yeah. So I just wanted to kind of just a little bit of gouache there. Move this off to the side. I feel like I need a little bit just more oomph. Let's see, what do I want to do? Here's a little bit of lemon yellow. I'm curious. Just being very timid, trying to think where I want to go with this. at the point where I'm ready to call this one done, I think. The experiment was pretty successful. Maybe I might do a wash of raw sienna over everything. Yep, I'm going to post this on YouTube. Thank you for dropping by to the chat. Good luck with distance learning, and don't stress out. You'll make it. All right, so thank you. So I'm going to do a quick dry off just because of this. I'm going to see if there's anything we want to do with it. Okay, do I want to do a gouache wash? A wash of raw sienna. Yeah, let's do a wash of raw sienna. Kind of unifying wash of everything. So a very gentle, light wash. There we go. Light red oxide. Pull down some light red oxide. Payne's gray. Burnt umber. Darkness to this guy right here. And I think we'll dry it and call it. Sit a mat over it, we'll sign it, and we'll call it. So, please like, subscribe, follow. Check me out on YouTube. Consider supporting me on Patreon if you don't mind. And I have artwork for sale on my Etsy shop, which you can find down below. If you ever have any questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to let me know. Also, if you ever want to follow along with one of these tutorials, obviously feel free, and you have my permission. If somebody says, hey, I want to buy from you, feel free to sell the painting that you do if you follow a tutorial. I want you guys to succeed. I want you all to have the money to buy art supplies.
All right, I hope you all enjoyed. Have a great day.